spent a month at a Chinese monastery in Taiwan, and completely different tradition from Tibetans. But lo and behold, I mean, the teachings were exactly the same. Even the examples that they sprinkled the teachings with. Anyway, it makes it easier for all of us because we're not involved in, some sort of club or movement, and it takes a lot of kind of psychological pressure off that isn't there, doesn't need to be there. Anyway, yeah. Mm. Oh, we can start, Dave, huh? Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. Back in the saddle, so to speak. We've kind of had a little hiatus here because of Rinchen Dorje's visit. And what else do we have? 4th of July, I think a couple of things that changed the schedule, and 1 week off recovering from Rinchen Dorje's visit. Anyway, good to be back. So what we've been doing here is we started with reading the Dalai Lama's introduction to the first complete translation of what's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And we've been going from that, talking about what he was talking about there and relating it to what we do here. The basic summation is Tibetan Book of the Dead is this, it's more than one book. It's really a very stack of texts. And it teaches one how to die, but truly is teaching one how to live. It makes this remarkable connection, you might say. It says that what we call Buddha nature, when we talk about it, and in a way you can't really talk about it because you can't objectify it, but nonetheless we have to for teaching purposes. And what we call Buddha nature is sometimes said to have 3, they're called bodies, but not like a physical body, but like a body of truth or something. First is the truth body, Dharma Kaya in Sanskrit. Second is the bliss body, which is like spontaneous enjoyment body, which is called Sambhoga Kaya. And then finally, the manifest body, Nirmana Kaya. So our Buddha nature exists simultaneously in this way. And the Dalai Lama uses the example of the Dharmakaya is like the sky, just completely vast. You can't grab onto it. You can't really measure it in any way. It's just this vast nature. But it has quality. Its color is blue. It's not just a voidness, not just an emptiness. It's not nihilistic, anything like that. It has quality. But that's the Dharmakaya. Then the Sambhogakaya is often said to be like the big cumulus clouds that pop up. They have form, so we're more easily able to relate to them, and yet we still can't grasp onto them. So it's like they have one foot in the absolute world and another foot in the relative world, which means that we can more easily attain to the absolute nature of our mind by dealing with these subtle forms. So that's called the Sambhogakaya. And how that's represented are all these visualized Buddhas that people see. So if you went to Southeast Asia, for instance, any of the Theravada traditions, they don't have all these, they have all these Buddhas in their teaching, but they don't really use it as part of their practice. Then finally, the Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, the manifest body of the Buddha, this is called the deceptive appearance of the Buddha, because it's the manner in which deluded beings can most easily relate to their own Buddha nature. And it's said to be like the raindrops falling out of these beautiful clouds in the sky. So we can benefit from the rain. It cleans us, it satisfies our thirst, it makes the crops grow, all of these things. So these 3 natures, well, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, these three aspects of our Buddha nature are linked to experiences that we actually have. Our living experience is the Nirmanakaya. Our Dharmakaya experience is at the moment after death. It's said that when we die, there's a process of dissolution of our mind going from this realm that we've projected, the scientific appearing world, into dissolving into subtler and subtler forms until finally, like a darkness, like a swoon, like a fainting. But then out of that pops this moment of clear light. This is the Dharmakaya. If one has been trained and has realized an aspect of the Dharmakaya to some degree, one can merge with it at that point and is Buddhahood. It's said, though, that this moment of clear light is like only the length of a snap of the fingers. But the more virtue that one has done, the more practices that one has done, that time seems to be extended, giving you a greater opportunity. But generally, people miss that. So what happens? Out of that Dharmakaya comes the Sambhogakaya, these visions of peaceful and wrathful Buddhas. And we go through a long period called the Bardo, the gap in between death and rebirth, in which we're sort of having like dreamlike experiences. So by recognizing those three moments, you can actually recognize your true nature. And this is the teaching of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Now, in our own practice here, when I mentioned, how it's said that coming out of India, so Buddha appeared in India and lived for 83 years, something like that. And Buddhism continued to develop strongly in India for like 1,500 years. And it was pretty much at that point when the Tibetans became Buddhist, and they sent their best and brightest over the Himalayas for a period of centuries. They actually developed the written language of Tibet, which before they had none. The writing system is based on Sanskrit, although Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, and Tibetan are completely different language families. It's kind of like Japan and China. They both use Chinese characters, but Japanese is not Chinese, not related to it. So they developed the written language, and they transmitted what's said to be the full range of Buddhist teachings as they existed in India at the peak of Buddhist cultural development. And so that's what's special about Tibet, is that the full range of the teachings were consciously transmitted to Tibet. Some have died out, but they have this incredible range. And what does that mean? It means that if you can find a teaching in the Buddhist world, you can find it or its near equivalent in what's called Tibetan Buddhism, but not the other way around. All the teachings of what are called Tibetan Buddhism didn't necessarily make it to Southeast Asia or Japan, China. So it's kind of an advantage for us because you approach a Tibetan Lama, a Tibetan teacher, and certain practice, and somehow it's just not working for you. He or she will just give you something else. So it's like a doctor with many, many medicines in their cabinet. So what's a little unusual about this place is that the purpose of a Tibetan temple, which is really what we are, is to offer the full range of Buddhist teachings. And at the same time, the Tibetans have their own flavor that's been that they have, and that's partly because their own teachings say that the particular teachings for our era, for a degenerate time, which we believe this is, are these tantric teachings. Tantrayana, the path of the Tantra, the Mantrayana, same thing, Vajrayana, all these different terms, but it's the same basic idea. The basic structure of the whole Buddhist path is that it starts with this whole path of renunciation. And renunciation, we have some language problems with this because all of our words have certain kind of, meanings and also associations. So renunciation, the actual breakdown of it, again and again and again, to do again. Nunce is zero, nothing, and shun, the state of. So the state of renouncing everything, basically, again and again. It sounds so bad, and especially in our culture, a Protestant culture especially, this idea that it's almost going back to John Calvin or something. It hurts so much, it must be good for me. But that's not the meaning of renunciation. The word in Tibetan and Sanskrit, I don't know either language, but I'm told, means the state of authentic becoming. So it's totally positive. But the basic teaching is to avoid evil, avoid harming others, avoid harming yourself. And there are many, many teachings that support this. So this is the path, how it starts, of renunciation. Instead of trying to find some sort of ultimate solution in this created world of ours, our projected world, instead we realize that like all our selfish trips are not going to work because they're limited. And because of the teachings of karma, if you do a limited cause, you get a limited result. And of course, all of us want more than that. We want a stable happiness. So this is the path of renunciation. But that leads to the conventional Mahayana. Maha means great, yana is career or path, the great path. This is what the Dalai Lama teaches publicly. So now it becomes not just don't harm, but help. Try to help people, but at least don't harm them. This is using our conventional mind, and it's called the path of the perfections. We're perfecting giving, we're perfecting ethics, we're perfecting patience, we're perfecting kind of joyful perseverance and energy. We're perfecting meditation, and we're perfecting wisdom. So it leads up to Buddhahood itself. That's the second great turning of the wheel, the path of great emptiness, great compassion. And finally, the third turning of the wheel that the Buddha taught is the path of Buddha nature. This is called Vajrayana. There are other teachings there that might loosely be linked to the Vajrayana, called Dzogchen, great completion, Mahamudra, the great seal, what is the essence of all of us. So it has these three great baskets of teaching, you might say. And for even a simple place like White Lotus, it's our job to sort of present the whole range, because you never know what works for people. And even at different times, different things work for different people, same person at different times. So that's a little challenging because there's so much to know, and yet at the same time, it's really very simple. The cause of Buddhahood is what we call bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, citta means mind, the awakening mind. And what is the awakening mind? Well, it's both conventional and absolute, you might say. On the conventional side, conventional bodhicitta or relative bodhicitta, or like working bodhicitta, is first aspirational. It's like, I want to liberate all beings. It's like thinking, I want to go to Washington, D.C. You have to have that idea. But then, to take one step towards Washington, D.C. is said to be engaging bodhicitta. This is incredibly powerful. So the engaging bodhicitta is actually the six perfections that I just mentioned, giving, ethics, and so on. And to give you an idea how it works, because even those are very rich in meaning, the perfection of giving, for instance, on the first level, it's protecting beings by giving them sustenance. So if they're hungry, food, if whatever their needs are, the material needs, you're giving. That's the first level of giving. The second level is protection from fear. And the third level is the giving of the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings. And that's not necessarily done by lecturing or by giving a book or anything like that. It can be the experience of just being patient with someone, It can help so much, when they're just totally agitated and there's a calm mind there instead of someone adding to. Sometimes even our attempt to help people, we actually make it more agitated. So the path of the perfections is one of stumbling all the time. We have the idea, the motivation, we're working on it. Doesn't work here, doesn't works there. Slowly we're learning from our mistakes. Every time we fall down, we get up by taking this vast vow of liberating all beings. So the practice then of the third turning of the wheel is what mostly what we're talking about with the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's called pure vision. And pure vision is training yourself to see all beings as bodhisattvas, seeing your teacher actually as being a full Buddha, not just someone farther along the path, of imagining the time to be timeless, for the teachings to be the stainless wisdom teachings, and this place to be a pure land. So it's extremely subtle, but actually all these teachings are the same in spirit. But nonetheless, so we present the full range of the teachings here, and that's a challenge because apart from Kempo, we don't really have anyone who's so thoroughly trained. All of us are lay people. A couple of people have taken minor vows. We got 3 monks that bang around a little bit. But apart from Kempo, we're all, Kempo's learning too, but we're especially all learning the basic structures and the practices and the meditations. So for instance, a meditation, the word meditation in Tibetan is gom, and it means to grow accustomed to. And that's so helpful to have these understandings because it's not just, crossing our legs and doing the formal mental exercises, but it's also during the day. It's growing accustomed to the practice of virtue. It's growing accustomed to be practicing mindfulness rather than playing with all our scattered thoughts. When it's time to think, we think, but we're just not playing with thoughts pointlessly or for some sort of entertainment. Although, if you want to be entertainment, you go to a movie, you enjoy the experience. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. But it's this confusion, mixing things together. So meditation is a process of concentrating the mind. We call it shamatha, tranquility meditation, with mindfulness on a particular object of concentration. The awareness of that is the key. So the awareness of that object and the awareness when we've lost the object, either through an agitated mind or a dull mind. We catch ourselves, we just go back to the object again and again and again. And in this way, we're training the mind. And the basic idea is path to Buddhahood is two-fisted, you might say. There's the calming the mind, and then it's using the power or the reality or the clarity of a calmer mind to look into the nature of the mind. So this is called shamatha, this is called vipassana, true seeing, tranquility, and then true seeing. So all of Buddhist practice is like that, although it can appear in ways that we don't realize what we're doing when we're doing visualizations. The clarity is it's this combination of this joining of the shamatha and vipassana. So that's why it's a particularly powerful practice, because you're doing both at once, this kind of pure vision, this kind of concentration on sacred forms. Again, the wonder of this is that we have 2,600 years of experience to analyze, to look at. The Buddha says, don't believe something because I say it. Don't believe it because some old wise man says that, or your parents, or whomever, or it's the societal bias, but only after testing it with your own mind and experience. And when you see that something is valuable, virtuous, tends to the good, then adopt it and practice it. So in meditation, Gom, growing accustomed to, we're growing accustomed to these favorable mind states, the beneficial causes that result in enlightenment, result in happiness, liberation, and then greater freedom. Now, the teachings themselves are helpful because, they sort of provide examples for us. So rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, we look at Buddha's life and say, oh my goodness, something there looks good. Maybe I'll give that a try, or there's enough opening of the heart to be able to take a step. I mean, it's kind of like someone wants to play the piano. You need to find a piano teacher. You have faith in that teacher, not necessarily an ultimate kind of faith, but enough to take the steps of doing it, making mistakes, and then you go from there. It's always like self-correcting. So that's basically what we're trying to do here. Now, on top of it, we're really fortunate because we have the examples still at this time of great teachers. So the man I referred to, Gar Rinpoche, was born in Tibet. He's 86, I think now. He lives in Arizona. He was born in eastern Tibet. And at a young age, he was recognized as being the rebirth, the reincarnation of a previous teacher. So this is always kind of mysterious, and you really wonder if it's just a pretend or whatever. But nonetheless, he was recognized. At age of 7, his parents took him to the monastery, which was his monastery, actually, and he was trained there. At the age of 19, I believe, he had started a traditional 3-year meditation retreat, which is the traditional training for a lama. This Tibetan word lama, la means highest wisdom, and ma means compassion, highest compassion. So lama together is someone who embodies highest wisdom and compassion. That's the belief. Lama is actually the Tibetan translation of the Sanskrit word guru. Interestingly, the Tibetans are very careful in this vast translation project that they did of translating syllable by syllable Sanskrit to Tibetan, because again, they were creating a sacred Tibetan language, a specific Dharma language. But there are a few words that they didn't translate literally, but more figuratively, and lama is one of them. So guru means heavy with positive qualities, whereas lama, again, wisdom and compassion, meaning's the same, but a little bit different. So he was trained to be a lama, and that's when China invaded Tibet. And he was involved in the resistance of Tibet to China's conquering of Tibet, and that happened in 1959. And he was thrown into a prison labor camp, and he was there for 19 years. In that camp, he happened to meet a man named Khenpo Munsel. Khenpo is a title, like our Khenpo here. They used to be the abbots of a monastery. Khenpo literally means one who knows, so it's a title. Munsel means dispeller of gloom, and he's one of the great teachers of 20th century Tibet. So Gar Rinpoche met Khenpo Munsel in prison and basically converted his prison experience into a secret wisdom retreat, not practicing in an outer way because the guards would beat you, but working on his mind all the time, developing tremendous sources of loving kindness and compassion, and then insight, out into the nature of the mind itself. After 19 years, he was out. Went back to his monastery. It's been reestablished there, and eventually came to America and has traveled all over the world. And even without our invitation, coming to our little humble place, he's been a tremendous benefactor for us. So we're very fortunate to have contacts with beings like that, because Tibet is different than it was. Chinese limit how many monks can be in a monastery, and they're not supportive of these special practices. Tibetans have done a tremendous job of keeping their traditions alive and the spark of it, because Buddhism is not just something like any museum, some dead tradition that you're just maintaining, but the point of it is realization, coming to realize the nature of your own mind. Seems so simple, and yet it's just amazing, sort of the tricks we do with ourselves. So that's the basic idea of what we're doing on Thursday nights. All right, where are we? And we've been using then, what we do on every other Tuesday night is this practice of Vajrakilaya. Garampache has given us that practice, and he sort of gave us an assignment, and he said, you need to do this. We're going to translate from the Tibetan into the English, and more than that, we're going to versify it so you can sing it with the same sacred tunes that are done at his monastery in Tibet. So we've done that. It's been translated, versified, and now we're learning. It says you need to learn it so you don't need any Tibetans around. You can do it on your own. And that includes the instruments and all sorts of stuff. So we've been working on that for a long time. And then he came out with this book, Vajrakalaya, Complete Guide and Experiential Instructions. Some of these teachings were taken from transcriptions of teachings that he gave here in Rochester, but he's gone around the world. So for instance, there were 3 of us who went to Moscow 10, 11 years ago. He had a Vajrakalaya retreat happening there, and there were like 500 people who showed up for this. So he's been all over the world doing this, and we're using his book on these teachings because it's profound, but also extremely practical, useful. Okay. So I thought I'd read a little bit from this tonight, and you get a little flavor of it. This is his introduction to these books. He says, for some years, I have been sharing at Dharma centers whatever knowledge I have about the practice of Vajrakilaya. With rejoicing, I offer thanks to the Tara Foundation for having collected these instructions and provided for their assembly, allowing Ari Kiev to translate and arrange them. On account of my inferior intellect and meager study, I certainly lack the refined exposition capable of rousing delight in the learned. Even so, Vajrakumara, it's another name for Vajrakalaya, is the chief personal deity of my paternal ancestors. Likewise, since successive generations at Gar Monastery have practiced Vajrakumara accomplishment retreats, and since his routine pujas, practices, came to be important there, I have relied on him as the destined deity with whom I have had an auspicious connection for lifetimes through karma and aspiration. As I have had the good fortune to practice Vajrakumara even from the time I was small, herein I have related whatever I could, with nothing but the intent to benefit others, based on the certainty associated with his felt blessing and on the slight experience I have gained. If masters of the learned, who have a broad knowledge of Sutra and Tantra, should opine on developing the good and rooting out the faults of my teachings, I will be most grateful. So a couple of things. One, here he refers to Vajrakalaya. Again, these are the wisdom teachings. So the example is in the path of renunciation, we're very much human beings, and we're just refraining from evil. The image that's used is that you're walking, it's basically a monk walking through a forest. In this forest are all these poisonous trees. And the fruit of the poisonous trees are afflictive emotions: anger, greed, jealousy, arrogance, and the whole panoply of these poisonous states. And in this renunciation practice, what do? We just stay away from it. You know, we see those poisonous fruits, just put up a sign, don't eat. That's what we do. We just stay away. And it's said that there's a monk walking there because there's some reason that practice of kind of like, you know, really big time renunciation more easily comes to men than women. Women can do it too. Women come to complete states of freedom using these levels of practices. But generally it's said it's a little bit, men's makeup is a little bit more inclined to it. Who knows why? But then the second is turning of the wheel, these teachings of great loving kindness and compassion. You're walking through that walking through the same poisonous forest. And now the practice is kind of like homeopathy. You take a little bit of that poisonous fruit and you use a little taste of it to practice the antidote. So we're trained in this, and then we start doing it practically. So for instance, when hatred arises, we've trained ourselves to realize that the antidote to hatred is patience. So we're training ourselves again and again and again, because we don't do it automatically. We do the opposite. So we're stuck in this situation, this dissatisfaction that we have. But nonetheless, you have to sort of experience the anger in order to practice the patience. So you're turning your afflictive emotions into positive triggers that cause you to practice virtue. Now, at this level, it makes no difference, male, women, we're all set up the same to do this kind of practice, the path of great loving kindness and compassion. And it leads in full Buddhahood, not just liberation from suffering, but complete omniscience. Now, the third turning of the wheel, which is what Rinpoche is talking about here, is these pure wisdom practices, Vajrayana, Tantrayana, Mantrayana, whatever. Now you're walking through that same poisonous forest, but you actually, the practice is you take that poisonous fruit and take a big bite out of it. And this is mind-boggling. It has to be based on the previous vast loving kindness and compassion. But what you're doing is you're recognizing the energy, you might say, of these negative mind states. And it's like a giant fire. You know, it looks terrible and scary, but it's liberating all this energy. And we're using that energy with this great vow of bodhicitta, of liberating others, to realize the nature of the mind itself. Now, in this level of practice, the female form is superior to the male. And again, not that men have not come to enlightenment doing this, but for whatever reason, the female form is said to be more, but again, there are no hard and fast rules, because there's a whole range of, capabilities and propensities within each gender itself. But nonetheless, the teaching is that the female form is superior for realizing this kind of practice. So that's what he's talking about here. Now, how do we do this? Well, to recognize the purity of our appearances. One thing we can do is visualize ourselves as Buddhas. This is what he's using, the word deity. English doesn't have a word for it, because when we say deity, we're thinking of a capital D, Jehovah, the Christian or Muslim or Jewish God. It's not that. I asked Lama Tarchin once, what's the translation of deity? And he said, great exaltation. So it's completely an experiential kind of thing. It's not a theological concept, but we're limited in English. What can you do? So the visualization of yourself as technically in Tibetan, a yedam, the indwelling deity. So again, our own nature, but again, like those big Sambhogakaya clouds, the vast emptiness appearing in a way that you can work with it, so to speak, and more easily relate. So that's what he's talking about here, this great exaltation. So it's a practice that in the higher states allows one to ride waves of bliss all the way to Buddhahood. And you can see why this has to be controlled, so to speak. It has to come out of this understanding of the suffering nature of things. And so we want to be free from that and dropping our trips and just this basic renunciation, basic facing our own stuff, and then to the great practice of vast loving kindness and compassion. So for instance, the Dalai Lama's favorite book is Entering the Bodhisattva Path by the Indian monk Shantideva. Shantideva literally means the peace of the gods. And it has 10 chapters in great detail, this wonderful kind of like epic poem almost. But there's great detail in there, say on patience. Why is patience superior to anger? What can you do when anger arises? How do we learn to recognize it and then to apply the antidote? All of this is very vast. All right, so a little bit more. This is from the translator, a friend of ours. It is taught that after cultivating precious bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment, and training in the progressive stages of the path, one can enter the door of the secret mantric Vajra vehicle, first receiving empowerment, then transmission, and finally practice instructions. This mode of spiritual development is fundamentally relational in its approach. It depends on the human condition between guru and disciple. Indeed, this is how Garchen Rinpoche and countless other realized lineage masters were gradually initiated into the mantric path. Now as ever, practitioners who aspire to become like them would do well to emulate their approach to the teachings. Because Garchen Rinpoche's actions are shaped by both extreme love and extreme pragmatism, they can sometimes be unorthodox and difficult to fathom. Ever cognizant of how fleeting human life is and how rare the conditions are to meet with and receive the sublime Dharma, Rinpoche fulfills without delay the wishes of those who approach him with interest. He offers lovingly and in good faith that which he has received. He has often spoken of his firm commitment to not investigate disciples' good and bad qualities or their spiritual histories. Only the Buddhas can know an individual's karma and fitness to receive any teaching. In this regard, maintaining unwavering trust in the sources of refuge, the Dharma guardians, and the workings of causality, Gar Rinpoche considers a person's interest in and access to the Dharma sufficient indications of his or her karmic connection. Because this manual includes secret teachings, normally these were not presented publicly. You had to make certain strong commitments, and teacher had to see this kind of commitment and purity of heart to give to these kinds of teachings, because they can be misused. So they were secret. But Ari says here, because this manual includes secret teachings, I asked Rinpoche about the threshold for readership. He responded with the following words, quote, "It is said that compassionately looking with a long-range view on the future time of dregs, the Buddhas taught mantric sadhanas, practices. Today, that future has become manifest. Right now is the time of dregs, in which secret mantra teachings must be propagated because they're more effective. It's said that the mantric teachings, the tantric teachings, the Vajrayana, is for times when everything's upside down. Society is viewing virtue as being non-virtuous, and viewing non-virtuous, supporting it as virtuous, or at least approved, and also that the emotions are very rough, very gross, heavy. Today that future has become manifest. Right now is the time of dregs in which secret mantra teachings must be propagated. As Guru Padmasambhava prophesied, when the wicked era burns like fire, the potent force of secret mantra will blaze forth. Because of this, and because it is far better to receive the Buddha's teachings than not, Rinpoche has offered the instructions herein without demanding prerequisites like empowerment, maintaining pure perception without investigating or discriminating. He has given the Dharma with an open hand. This is one of the ways in which he upholds his samaya, or commitment, to beings and to the sources of refuge. It is not Rinpoche's style to offer the Buddha Dharma in a prescriptive way, establishing and policing rules of conduct. Instead, disciples must mature beyond outwardly imposed dictates, taking personal responsibility for their own actions, which are to be tempered by love and heedfulness of cause and effect. Thus, how we approach, receive, and integrate Rinpoche's instructions, how we uphold our own samaya commitments, is a matter we must ultimately determine for ourselves. Yeah, this is an amazing book. It's almost 500 pages long. I haven't been able to get through it. I read a little bit, and it's inspiring and profound, and you want to read the paragraph again and again, because it's like that. But it's a guide to the practice that we do every other Tuesday here in the retreat. We have one of his disciples, Lama Abu, come once a year, and we do this 5-day retreat here. That's coming up in October, I think. Okay, So I think that's enough tonight. I feel like we're getting back in the saddle, which is a good feeling. Any questions? Anybody tonight? Anybody on Zoom, Dave? All right, wonderful, wonderful. Then we can dedicate. Oh, I hear noise. It's all right. Let me find a dedication. We can do a dedication. All right, we take the merit, the positive inertia, momentum that has been gained through turning our minds toward the Dharma for once, even briefly in an evening like this, for the good intention and the openness of mind and the seeking to understand. We take that merit and dedicate it to all motherly sentient beings, each and every one of them. We think of what we owe our mothers, the difficulties they've gone through so that we could take birth, that we could survive when helpless, that we were trained and educated in order to support ourselves, and that we can pass on the teachings through the efforts in carrying the powers that our mothers have sustained with us. We offer everything to those mother beings. The Dalai Lama says, the worldly view is compassion, we're looking down on sentient beings, but for the Buddhists, we're looking up to sentient beings, because it's because of their efforts, our connection with them, that we have everything good that we have. So we dedicate all that merit to all the motherly sentient beings. May each and every one of them come to self-liberation and further to enlightenment, and may we never rest until that is so. Svaha. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. Next is, I wanted to mention we have a Tibetan nun coming. Deki Palmo, is that her name? Can't remember, sorry. Virginia, our friend in Florida, is arranging her tour of the United States, and she's coming here in a couple of weeks, I think, in August. And we're practicing Chud. So if you can, try to plug into that, because Chud is really wonderful. It's the one practice that instead of practices coming from India to, there was this remarkable Tibetan woman, Machi Lapdrum, who developed the Chud practice. Chud means to cut. And it's a method by which we cut our basic attachment, which is our attachment to our body itself. And so it's marked by playing this giant drum, two-faced drum, and ringing a bell at the same time. We're going to sell the drums in the store for anyone who wants. But the tunes are